Have you ever worked in a government's underground archive? The one that doesn't officially exist. A massive repository 35 stories deep? No. Then you're lucky. But now that you're about to hear this story, you'll also know its terrifying truth. And once you know, you can never go back to a normal life. My name is Michael Harris. 3 months ago, I broke 2 rules in that underground archive to save the woman I loved. This is the result. Every night at 3:17 a.m., a knock on my apartment door. I peer through the peephole, and there's no one there. But from down the hall, I always hear it. The sound of men in decaying military uniforms marching. The first week, I tried to convince myself it was a dream. But the footsteps resonate every night with the same rhythm, at the same time. Left, right, as precise as a military parade, and they never stop. Sometimes, mixed with the footsteps, I hear the sound of metal scraping, perhaps the rusty military tags swaying on their chests. I asked the neighbors, but no one heard anything. The landlord started to worry about my sanity. But I know, this is real, and it's the consequence I brought upon myself. It all started 3 months ago when I was desperate for a job. I graduated from law school, but I couldn't find work, and my debts kept piling up. My rental apartment was always cold, with black mold from the humidity creeping across the ceiling and walls. It was truly rock bottom. My university friends were all landing jobs one after another, posting photos from their new offices and meals with colleagues on social media. It became painful for me to see those posts, and I eventually deleted all my accounts. Loneliness weighed heavier with each passing day. One gray morning, I couldn't stand being in the apartment anymore and went outside. I had enough money for a cup of coffee, so I headed to a nearby cafe. Opening my laptop at a corner table, I browsed job sites when one ad caught my eye. Assistant Archivist Wanted. The job involved cataloging and managing diverse and valuable items at the National Archive. For me, who had dreamed of working in a museum or library since childhood, this felt like fate. A week after applying, I received an interview invitation. The specified address was an uninspired building in an out-of-town business district. When I received my visitor's pass at the reception, I was told to hand over my cell phone. "I'm an unemployed college graduate, not a spy," I said. The receptionist, expressionless, handed me a security pouch. The inside of the building was eerily quiet. There should have been offices on other floors, but there was no sign of people. The elevator hall had a company directory, but many floors were marked unavailable. The company names on the remaining floors were all strange, unheard of names. National Document Preservation Institute, Special Item Management Bureau, Classified Information Processing Center. I couldn't imagine what kind of research they were doing. The elevator was old, with numbers on the buttons partially faded. The mirror inside was foggy, and the lights flickered continuously. As it ascended, I noticed a strange smell. It was a mix of disinfectant and something organic, putrid. The interviewer introduced himself as Mr. Johnson, an ordinary-looking man. Later, if asked by the police to help identify him from photos, I wouldn't be confident. His face was that unremarkable. Strangely, several times during the interview, I tried to look at his face, but my focus just wouldn't settle. It was as if his very existence was blurred. The interview questions were unusually personal. After being grilled about family relationships, romantic relationships, and political beliefs, they only briefly touched on my education and work history. What stood out was the question,
If your family or friends were to look for you, how long do you think it would take them to give up?
I wasn't given a chance to ask questions. and they told me nothing about the archive's details. Regarding the salary, they simply said,
An appropriate amount will be paid.
walking through the city, loosening my tie, I found 2 notices slipped under my apartment door. One was a debt collection notice from the credit card company, and the other was an eviction warning from the landlord. Both deadlines were in a week. Sweating cold, my phone rang. It was the job offer. 2 days later, I stood in my new workplace. This time, an older man greeted me. He had wild white hair and looked like he'd dressed in the dark. He carried an old leather briefcase.
I'm Dr. Miller. I'll be your supervisor.
He said with a smile as he pressed the elevator button.
Say goodbye to sunlight.
He said with a smile as he pressed the elevator button.
Say goodbye to sunlight.
As the elevator began its descent, it suddenly grew hot. The floor indicator was different from a normal building. For some reason, floors B10 onwards were displayed in red numbers. Past B20, the display itself changed to an older style with a handwritten-like font. What does this mean? I pointed to the floor display.
Each level has a different function.
Dr. Miller replied.
The red numbers indicate a higher level of classification. The handwritten displays are levels that do not exist in official records.
The elevator continued its descent. B25, B30, B35. My ears began to hurt from the pressure. Are there even deeper levels? I asked. Dr. Miller's smile vanished. How many underground floors are there? Dr. Miller showed his yellow teeth and laughed.
35. This facility is like an iceberg. Most of it is below the surface, only for people like you and me to see. But there's something you must be careful about. Never ask about the deeper levels, especially not below B25.
His voice suddenly dropped.
That's the first rule. Never ask about the deep levels. Any staff member who breaks this rule will not return to the surface. Understood?
He laughed again, gesturing with his hand for me to proceed. As we walked, he continued to talk about the numbering system, catalogs, departments and subdepartments, and cross-referencing. My head was spinning. My first workspace was a room filled with old books. My inner nerd rejoiced.
The archive was established in 1947. It started smaller, stored in a single warehouse until the 1960s. Then it was moved here, and when available space ran out again, the decision was made to expand underground instead of relocating.
Dr. Miller handed me a duster mask and elbow pads.
Your job is to take books off the shelves and dust them. If you find bugs, kill them. Insecticides are prohibited as they damage the books.
The rest of that day was miserable. My eyes were red and itchy. My back ached from carrying heavy books, and countless bugs crawled on my skin and scalp. I was sure I'd swallowed a few. Among the old books, some were clearly dangerous. Books that emitted strange odors when opened. Books that gave a slight electric shock-like sensation when touched. And books where the letters seemed to move. Is this normal? I asked Dr. Miller.
What is?
The letters in this book seemed to be moving. Dr. Miller looked at the book I was holding and nodded.
Ah, that's a 17th century alchemy text. It's written with special ink that reacts to the reader's mental state. You'll get used to it.
Get used to it. What in the world did that mean? But from the next day on, I had time to examine the contents of the books. Books on fortune-telling, cryptid books about Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, and the Jersey Devil, old alchemy grimoires, a 12-volume first edition on magical curses. What particularly fascinated me was a book titled Records of Human Transformation, supposedly written in 1692. It detailed transformations into werewolves, vampires, and other supernatural beings. What was unsettling was that it was written not as mere superstition, but as scientific observational records. And there were books detailing medieval execution methods, not in the style of history books, but entirely in the format of a how-to guide. It was gruesome and captivating. Even more horrifying, the book had annotations written with modern dates. 1987 demonstrated at B32. 2003 applied to subject 4471, and so on. What sent chills down my spine the most was a note tucked into the last page of a book. It was handwritten. Warning to new staff. All these records are based on actual events, not fantasy. A week later, Dr. Miller took me to an even deeper level. When the elevator opened, there was a shuttered door at the end of a short corridor. Before opening the door, Dr. Miller told me,
Before you enter, there are some precautions. The items stored on this level are of an extremely peculiar nature. You must never touch them directly. Also, avoid staying for more than 30 consecutive minutes. Prolonged exposure can cause unexpected side effects. Before you enter, there are some precautions. The items stored on this level are of an extremely peculiar nature. You must never touch them directly. Also, avoid staying for more than 30 consecutive minutes. Prolonged exposure can cause unexpected side effects.
"What kind of side effects?"
Headaches, nausea, disorientation of time. In severe cases, memory alteration and personality changes have been reported. One staff member, after spending 6 hours here, came to believe they were living in another era.
I shivered. What happened to that staff member?
They are currently receiving treatment in the medical wing. Special ward on B45.
B45. That was a floor that officially didn't exist. Stepping into the vast open space, it first looked like scattered metal scraps. Dozens of large, dark wreckage pieces spread before me, perhaps vehicle wreckage or some kind of aircraft. But as I approached, it became clear that these objects didn't match any technology on Earth. The metal had a luster unlike any known alloy, and there were no seams, bolts, or weld marks whatsoever. It was as if they had been carved from a single, massive piece of metal. The wreckage gradually grew larger, some pieces cut off at the ends or crushed. I felt like I was looking at the results of a high-speed, violent collision. Yet the way the collision damage manifested didn't seem to follow normal laws of physics. There were parts where the metal bent inward, as if gravity had been reversed. After about 10 minutes of walking, I stopped in front of a giant dark slab. It was smooth and circular, looking like a finished product. I was captivated. It was about 15 meters in diameter and 3 meters thick. Fine patterns were engraved on its surface, and upon closer inspection, geometric designs were intricately interwoven. It possessed a beauty that seemed neither human art nor a natural creation.
Some of what's stored here dates back to the very beginning of the archive. The object we're looking at was acquired in the late 1950s. At that time, measurements and photographs were taken for the records.
Dr. Miller pulled a small device from his briefcase.
Use this 3D handheld scanner to create a digital image of the object. Nothing difficult. Just point and press the button. However, under no circumstances should you touch the object directly. Staff who have touched it in the past have experienced strange side effects.
Without further explanation, he walked towards the back of the space. There were no seams or openings visible on the object's outer surface. No markings. Even if they said it was from the 1950s, it looked far too advanced. The light on top of the scanner began to flash red. Thinking it was a technical issue, I tapped it and tried to turn it back on, but the red light continued to flash. I decided to look for Dr. Miller. As I walked, I saw a tarp scattered on the floor. I knew I should ignore it. Life would be simpler that way. I could finish work, go home, stop by a bar for a cold beer, and chat casually with the waitress. But curiosity won out. It was old and stained with what looked like blood. The tarp's material seemed military grade, with small holes here and there. I lifted the edge of the tarp, and underneath was a box. It was about 120 centimeters long and 60 centimeters wide, with a transparent top. Inside was a skeleton. At first, I thought it was human remains, but upon closer inspection, it was clearly different. The skull's proportions were completely unlike a human's. The cranium was enlarged, and the eye sockets were abnormally large. The jawbone was small, and the teeth had a different shape from human teeth. I remembered images I'd seen on low-budget late-night TV shows. Shows with titles like Unexplained or Phenomena due to budget constraints. Fun, trashy content that I believed to be completely fabricated. Until now. But what was before my eyes was not fabricated. The texture of the bones, the structure of the joints, everything was real. Staring at the skeleton, I thought about the complete aircraft and the wreckage, and the period from 1947 to the 1950s. It was the golden age of alien encounters and UFOs. With excitement and frantic thoughts swirling in my head, I tore off the rest of the tarp. I gasped. There was another box. It was the same dimensions as the first, with the same transparent top, but this time the bones had flesh on them. The body inside had grayish skin. The skin tone was very pale, and the skin was wrinkled. The head was again enlarged, and the long, wide eyes at its base were closed. I would have given anything for those eyes to open and to have the chance to communicate with what I was convinced was an extraterrestrial being. But from its condition, I was staring at a corpse. I heard Dr. Miller's footsteps and saw him walking towards me.
Problem?
I almost blurted out the truth, but managed to restrain myself, only telling him the scanner was acting up.
I'll have a technician look at it later and repair it. Come with me. We have a lot to do, and we're short-staffed.
For the next few days, Dr. Miller remained friendly but distant. Fortunately, there were no further disturbing encounters. As the first month drew to a close, I convinced myself that the corpse in the box would have a mundane explanation, an old movie prop, or a fake from a traveling carnival. The so-called spaceship and other things must be something similar. I just hadn't figured it out yet. But deep down, I knew the truth. They were real, and I had to do something. With my first paycheck, I made a partial debt payment, bought new clothes, and went out to have a good time. But I couldn't enjoy myself. The thought of those beings was always on my mind. The next Monday, I stumbled into work, hungover, trying to remember where I'd gone and what I'd done. I hoped for a quiet, uneventful day, but Dr. Miller shattered that hope.
I'm very pleased with your work so far. I'm happy to give you your own key card. I hope the weight of responsibility doesn't overwhelm you.
He chuckled as he handed me the key card. All I felt was a new pain in my head. The elevator descended to an even deeper part of the archive than before. The elevator rattled to a stop, and when the doors opened, I stepped into a place that looked like an apartment building hallway. There was old, light brown carpet, and a series of doors on either side, each with a small plastic number attached to the outside. There were no buzzers or peepholes. It was an old, dilapidated, and unsettling place. Dr. Miller opened the nearest apartment door without issue and went inside. Not knowing what to do, I followed. Entering a small living room, there was a television in the corner showing a game show. Both the TV and the show seemed old. An antique lamp sat on a table next to a recliner. All of them were past their prime. So was the middle-aged man slumped in the recliner. He wore a stained white tank top, his exposed shoulders, upper back, and chest covered in dark gray matted hair. His fat belly sagged over his belt, which was unbuckled. Beneath it, he wore baggy shorts. His feet were bare and dirty. His eyes were open, staring blankly at the television. He hadn't moved an inch even after we entered the apartment, and he didn't react when Dr. Miller took a thermometer from his briefcase and held it to the man's ear for a few seconds. After reading it, Dr. Miller lowered the thermometer and mumbled to himself,
No change. Good.
Then he left the man as he was and exited the apartment. In the apartment across the hall, the decor was also stuck in the 1980s. The sofa was centered, facing a television. This time, it showed a soap opera with an actress with shoulder pads and a blonde perm, and an actor in suspenders and a striped shirt. A man and a woman were slumped on the sofa, staring listlessly at the events unfolding on the screen, oblivious to me and Dr. Miller. When Dr. Miller finished his temperature check and seemed satisfied with the results again, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Are they in a coma?"
No,
Dr. Miller replied,
they are in a peculiar state. This couple and the man across the hall and the residents of the other apartments were participants in an experiment. For several years, in exchange for free food and drink, they were to undergo regular health checkups to determine the effect of their diet on their health. The food and drink contained extremely high levels of preservatives. This was the result. They are, strictly speaking, neither alive nor dead. Thanks to all the chemicals they ingested, they are preserved.
I peered into the eyes of the couple on the sofa, but there was no sign of perception. However, occasionally, they blinked. It was a mechanical blink at regular intervals, as if programmed. But why are they here? I asked. Why is the TV on and showing old shows? Why are there furniture and a hallway? Dr. Miller, unfazed by the barrage of questions, calmly replied,
When the experiment was completed, the subjects and their environment were acquired for the archive and moved here to be stored in the exact same state they existed in the old apartment building. In other words, we can perfectly preserve what has been preserved.
He chuckled as he said this. I was starting to dislike Dr. Miller's laugh. It had a dark resonance with an undertone of someone losing their sanity. Are they conscious? I asked, tentatively.
Partially. They're in a dreamlike state. For them, time has stopped, repeating the same day for eternity. Perhaps that's happier for them. They'll never know how the outside world has changed.
A few floors up, in the reference library, I met her. A library with wooden filing cabinets towering to the ceiling, and rows of shelves holding slim volumes. There was one table, and a young woman was writing something in a large, hardcover journal. She was about 5 years older than me, with long black hair and green eyes. I thought she was beautiful, but there was a fragile, sad shadow to her beauty, as if she carried some heavy secret. Dr. Miller called out. The young woman looked up. In that moment, I saw deep intelligence in her eyes, and at the same time, deep despair.
Dr. Miller, can I help you with anything?
Her voice was beautiful, but also somewhat mechanical, as if she had repeated the same words many times.
Not today, thank you. I just came to pick up the catalog and will leave shortly.
She smiled at me. It was a sad smile, but that made her seem even more appealing. I should have realized that within that smile there was a silent cry for help. The next day, I went to see her. I'm taking a break, and if you don't mind, would you like some coffee?
Thank you, but I don't drink coffee.
No problem. How about tea or cola? Or maybe we could go for something stronger after work. She looked at me with her captivating green eyes for a while and then said,
You're kind, but going for a drink after work is something I can't do.
Can't do? I asked, confused. She gave a sad smile and said,
No, I can go anywhere in the archive, but I can't go outside.
Then she lifted her hair from her neck, revealing a circular scar.
There's a transmitter implanted from surgery. If I try to take the elevator to the ground floor, an alarm will trigger, and I'll be apprehended and brought back here.
My head was spinning. So, you're a prisoner here?
I'm held here. I'm allowed to work in certain libraries and central records rooms on this level. It's quite boring, but it helps me stay sane and pass the day. At night, I go to my living quarters 2 floors down. It's small but comfortable, and I usually sleep well most nights.
Her way of speaking carried years of resignation, as if she had learned to accept her situation. But why? What did you do? Her smile grew sadder, and her eyes drew me in.
It wasn't what I did, but what was done to me. I was attacked by a werewolf, and the curse began to flow through my veins. Eventually, I was captured by the authorities and transferred to a secure facility for research. I think they tried to harness my dark powers for their own purposes, but they learned nothing, and I became redundant. Then I was transferred to the archive. Since then, on full moon nights, I feel the urge to transform into a malicious beast, but here it's just agony. You don't have to worry, as I don't transform or bite. Though the next full moon is tonight.
As she spoke, I noticed her hands. Her fingernails were a little longer than usual, slightly sharper, but at the same time, her hands were trembling. I didn't know if it was from fear or suppressed power. I was speechless, and I didn't yet know that this would be my second broken rule. How long have you been here?
7 years. Sometimes, I imagine what the outside world is like. How far technology has advanced, how people have changed. But I only imagine. For me, time has stopped.
That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Annabelle, her sad smile, her green eyes, and the terrifying truth she had told me. I was falling in love, even though I knew it was dangerous. The next morning, I didn't want to go to the archive, but I dragged myself there. A mix of wanting to see Annabelle and anxiety about her words last night. Tonight's a full moon. Something strange happened on the way to the archive. The normally busy streets were oddly deserted, and I saw several black cars parked on the road. Entering the building, I noticed the security was tighter than usual. Several men in sunglasses were stationed in the lobby. They stared at me but said nothing. As I got on the elevator, one of the guards approached me.
Mr. Harris, please clock out early today. Special operations are scheduled.
What operations?
Details are classified. Follow instructions.
I stood in front of the elevator and pressed the button, and the elevator arrived. Inside were 2 men in black suits and sunglasses, standing next to a medical trolley. On the trolley was a body bag, clearly with something inside. Blood oozed from the body bag, forming a small puddle on the elevator floor. The blood was fresh, not yet clotted. One of the men gestured for me to stand back, and they pushed the trolley with its disturbing cargo out of the elevator and headed towards the gate. I stood there, staring. I tried to tell myself everything would be fine. Once I started working on the files, Dr. Miller would arrive shortly. I'd get bored and want to see Annabelle, because now she was all I cared about. But deep down, I had a terrible premonition about what was in that body bag. The elevator doors were still open. I was about to go, but I stopped when my name was called from behind. I turned around, and it was the man I'd met before the interview, or one of the interviewers. Honestly, I couldn't tell them apart. Out of breath, he said,
There you are. Come with me.
I figured the files could wait and followed him 2 floors up in the elevator, through a nondescript hallway, and into a nondescript room. There, The man in sunglasses instructed me to take a seat. The room was like an interrogation room, only a desk and chairs, with nothing on the walls. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling flickered with an unpleasant hum. I started to feel nauseous. I thought I was going to be fired. The man in sunglasses said,
An incident occurred this morning at the lowest level of the archive. Your supervisor's body was discovered by other staff members. Dr. Miller was brutally murdered. His skin was torn in several places, bitten, and parts of his body were eaten. It was a carnage. Do you understand what I'm saying?
He might have been staring at me as he spoke, but I could only see the dark lenses of his sunglasses. I understand, I managed to reply. The man continued,
Good. And now that I've explained the situation, I want to reassure you that you can return to your normally assigned work. You are in no danger.
But the killer? I asked.
There was only one suspect. We easily apprehended her. The werewolf is currently in custody and being transferred to a maximum security federal facility.
The room started to spin. I gripped the edge of the chair, trying to hold on. Evidence? I asked, my voice trembling.
Her hair was left at the discovery site. Also, the nature of the attack was clearly bestial. The bite marks matched. There's no doubt.
They thought Annabelle had killed Dr. Miller, but they were wrong. She had said the moon's call wasn't strong enough to transform in the archive's depths. She wouldn't lose control. But what if she had really transformed? What if I didn't know anything about her? No, that was impossible. There was no trace of violence in her eyes last night. Only sadness and loneliness. I knew what I had to do. I had to find the real killer and prove Annabelle's innocence. Can I visit her?
That's impossible. She's not here anymore. Forget about it and go back to work.
As I left the room, my resolve was set. I would save Annabelle, whatever it took. I returned to the lowest level, the end point. Exiting the elevator, I saw a large stack of wooden crates. There was a narrow passage between the crates, and I followed it. My mind was made up. I would find the real killer and prove Annabelle's innocence. But at the same time, what if I was wrong? What if she really was the killer? Such doubts also crossed my mind. After just a few minutes of walking, I noticed a strong disinfectant smell and discovered a small area of the floor that looked recently cleaned. The cleaning crew hadn't done a thorough job. There was a black stain to the left, which I knew was blood. There were also blood stains on the side of the crates across the aisle. It was where Dr. Miller had been butchered, where the blood had flowed. Looking closely at the bloodstains, I noticed something strange. The splatters were different from a typical animal attack. If it had been a wolf or a large carnivore, the bloodstains would have been lower. But here, the bloodstains reached human height. A shiver ran through me. While I had been frustrated by the supervisor's presence, he shouldn't have died so brutally in such a strange and lonely place. I clenched my fists, trying to muster courage, but fear won out. I wanted to turn back and run. Then I thought of Annabelle. I pictured her face and tried to imagine where she was now. How scared she must be. I took a deep breath and moved forward. The passage between the crates continued. It grew narrower and narrower, and I started to feel claustrophobic. The crates seemed to press in on me, making it hard to breathe. The sides of the crates snagged my clothes, and a nail sticking out from one crate caused a sharp pain in my hand. I saw I had a cut. The sound of dripping blood seemed unnaturally loud in the silence. Finally, I emerged from the crates and stood in an open space. The air was dusty, and the lights continued to flicker. I had the feeling that no one working in the archive had been here for a long time. But there were footprints on the floor. Not just multiple human footprints, but also strange shaped tracks, like those of a four-legged animal, but human-sized. Still, I kept putting one foot in front of the other. Shadows danced irregularly around me, and my heart pounded violently. I saw a door ahead and hurried towards it. The door was open and broken, as if forced open. There were deep claw marks on the metal door frame. Inside was a stairwell. The flickering light from behind illuminated the beginning of the stairs going up to the right and the stairs going down to the left. Faint footprints were visible in the dust on the ascending stairs, and I heard a sound from the top of the stairwell. It was a growl. Whatever was making the sound was hidden from view, but it was approaching beyond the bend in the stairwell, and the sound was growing louder. It was neither a human voice nor an animal voice, something in between. I started to back away. I couldn't think straight in my panic. I started to descend the stairwell. In a few seconds, I was in complete darkness. Above, the unseen growling continued. I couldn't go back. I had to keep descending. In the darkness, I relied on my senses, hoping to find some other exit. As I descended the stairs, the air grew even colder. The humidity also increased, and the smell of mildew assailed my nostrils. I lost track of how far down I was going. Perhaps I was even deeper than the official 35 floors. Eventually, I felt like I was at the bottom of the stairwell. I saw the light of fire through an open door ahead. I moved towards it and found a man standing over the fire. His back was to me, his hands held over the fire, as if trying to warm himself. I thought he hadn't noticed me, until he mumbled in a low voice,
"No matter how hard I try, I can't get warmth into my bones."
Then he turned and looked at me. He was horrifying. His skin was decaying in places, with some parts completely rotted away, revealing the bones beneath. Bloodshot eyes bulged from his gaunt face, and long hair hung to his shoulders. The hands he was trying to warm had more bone than flesh. In my shock, I realized he was wearing tattered military fatigues, and I started to notice other figures in the darker corners of the room. They were also creatures of decaying flesh and bone. Some hunched over, some stood tall. I saw one of them holding a rifle. Some wore uniforms so well preserved that their rank insignia were still visible.
"Don't worry about Corporal McKinley.
The dilapidated man said.
He won't shoot you."
I tore my eyes from the rifle and looked back at him. There was a smile on his grotesque face.
"I am Captain Paul Jackson. These fallen men are what's left of the company I once commanded, the Fighting 54th.
With so many questions rushing through my head, I asked, out of breath,
"Why are you here?" "We were ordered to witness the testing of a new missile. We were told it was safe from the observation point. But the moment the missile exploded and the heat and dust hit us, we knew they had lied. Soon after, our skin started to blacken and peel. They took us to a hospital with bars on the windows and armed guards outside every door. After the doctors finished poking and prodding us, they brought us here. That was a long time ago, and I think the people running this place have forgotten about us. We don't mind. We look out for each other and do the best we can."
He continued to stare at me as he spoke and then asked me,
"Are you here to break our peace?"
"No," I quickly replied. And then I explained who I was, about Dr. Miller and Annabelle, and the terrifying sounds I had heard. He showed a thoughtful expression and said,
"We knew there was something new upstairs. We thought it was some kind of creature that had escaped from that level, but we were going to leave it alone as long as it kept its distance. But from what you're saying, it seems that presence has attracted the administrators here and could ruin everything."
Then he straightened his back, squared his shoulders, and said,
"Men of the 54th, let's hunt the monster."
His men saluted in unison. Even with decaying hands, their military pride remained. The dilapidated men led the way. He and the company moved silently and confidently through the darkness. I was at the back. My nerves were shattered. My legs felt hollow, and I was truly glad this strange corps of soldiers wasn't an enemy. When Captain Jackson gave hand signals, his men moved with perfect military discipline. Even in death, their training hadn't been lost. We arrived at the stairwell, and I followed them up to the level where Dr. Miller had died. The dilapidated man swung his arm up, giving a command, and his men began to fan out. They advanced slowly in a single file, weapons at the ready. There was no sign of the monster, no sound. Only my clumsy footsteps broke the silence.
Quiet.
Captain Jackson whispered.
The enemy is aware of our presence.
As the stacked crates drew closer, there was a passage. Something was emerging from the dark, narrow opening. I froze in terror. The monster moved on all fours like an animal, but it had a human form. Its skin was pale and stretched taut over its bones. Its eyes were red, and where its nose and mouth should have been, there was a single opening lined with needle-like teeth. Long claws protruded from its fingers and toes. But what was most terrifying was the fact that this creature had once been human. The facial structure, the body proportions, everything was a distorted version of human features, as if it were the result of some horrific experiment. The scraping sound on the floor stopped when the creature noticed us and paused before the intruders in its hunting ground. It tilted its head, as if observing the intruders. There was intelligence in its movements, bestial, yet calculated. And from its opening, a growl drifted, and drool dripped from its sharp teeth, glistening in the flickering light. I wanted to scream, but fear had stolen my voice. The dilapidated man calmly said,
Continuous fire on my signal.
He raised his right arm, and bone showed through a tear in his uniform. Again, I was glad I had formed such a strange alliance. He began to lower his arm, but before he could complete the signal, the monster lunged with shocking speed. It attacked one of the soldiers before he could react. Teeth sunk into the remaining flesh of his shoulder, but he did not cry out in pain. Instead, he said,
"You can't hurt me, monster. I have no nerve endings, but plenty of grit."
He grabbed its neck and began to push back. I saw flesh tearing from his shoulder where the monster was still clinging with its teeth, but he didn't flinch. He threw the monster to the ground and disengaged. His comrades began firing. The monster's body danced under the assault, and when the dilapidated man ordered a ceasefire, it was devastated, utterly dead. But looking closely at the corpse revealed an even more horrifying truth. The creature was wearing the remnants of an experimental uniform. There was a surgical scar on the back of its neck, and a metal plate was embedded in its skull.
This is an experiment subject.
As the soldiers began to drag the corpse towards the stairwell, the dilapidated man said to me,
Are you going to tell the people who run the archive about this?
I have to. It's the only way to save Annabelle. He looked at me again with his dead eyes and said,
Then we can't let you leave. You'd expose us faster than that monster.
I covered my face with my hands. I felt like crying. After a moment, the dilapidated man said,
If you give us time, there might be another way. We might leave and find a new place to live.
My heart soared. Yes, and I'll help.
Deal.
He replied, smiling and extending his hand. Staring at the bone and decaying skin, I told myself I could do it. I reached out and clasped his cold hand. Deal. In that handshake, I felt a part of their memories. The nuclear flash, the sensation of skin melting, seeing their comrades die one by one, the terror and betrayal they experienced, and decades of loneliness. I made my way back through the crates to the elevator and returned to my files. While I was working, the man in sunglasses appeared.
Any problems?
He asked. I steadied my voice and replied, "Everything's going well, making good progress organizing these files." He nodded, seeming satisfied.
Keep up the good work. Remember, there's a senior archivist position open now. It's a role where dedicated team players are considered.
He chuckled, and I simply smiled back. He thought I was a loyal employee. He was wrong. I just knew that working within the system was the best way to achieve my goals. I had to be patient and careful, help the dilapidated men and the company escape, save Annabelle, and if I could, destroy the system. I worked normally for the rest of the day, but deep down, I was making a plan. First, I needed to find out where Annabelle had been taken. That required inside information. In the evening, when the office was empty, I snuck into the administrative area. Dr. Miller's office was sealed off, but the room next door was vacant. I accessed the computer and searched the staff database. Annabelle Collins, transferred to Top Secret Facility R7, location, classified, but there was additional information. The transfer was temporary, marked, awaiting disposal. Disposal. I didn't want to think about what that word meant. Forget about dusty old objects. I had found my true purpose in life. 3 months later, I still work at the archive. On the surface, I'm a model employee. But at night, I'm making plans. The rescue mission for Annabelle failed, but I haven't given up. With every new piece of information, the plan becomes more refined. Captain Jackson and the 54th Company have found a new hiding place. In the deepest part of the facility, on the officially non-existent B40 level. There, they are forming a secret resistance organization with other staff members who seek the truth. The director trusts me. He thinks I've surrendered. That's my greatest weapon. Every night at 3:17 a.m., there's a knock on my apartment door. I look through the peephole, and no one is there. But from down the hall, I hear the sound of men in decaying military uniforms marching. It's a signal to me. A signal not to forget. A signal that the fight continues. Recently, I made a new discovery. Annabelle was not disposed of. She's in a top secret area on B50. Dozens of special abilities individuals like her are housed there, and I learned the true purpose of this facility. The underground archive is not just a repository. It's a massive weapons factory, an experiment ground, and a prison. The most dangerous beings on Earth are gathered here, under the guise of protecting humanity. But who watches the watchers? Who limits the power of those in power? The answer is us. You now also know the rules of the underground archive. Once you know, you can never forget. If you ever have a job interview in a bland government building, and they tell you to hand over your cell phone, remember this. 50 floors of terror await underground, and the people who work there never return to the surface. But there is hope. As long as there are people who know the truth and are willing to fight. As long as there are people who keep the light burning in the darkness. And as long as there are people who believe that love is stronger than any fear. The fight continues, and we will surely win. Because we have something they don't. Humanity.